In the heart of rain-soaked Seattle, a simple act of kindness is about to change two lives forever. Sarah Martinez, a single mom working two jobs to keep her daughter in college, spots a drenched stranger in a wrinkled suit trying to hail a cab. What she doesn't know is that this seemingly ordinary man is Marcus Chen, Seattle's most enigmatic billionaire, who spent the past year living undercover to find something real in a world of artificial connections. The ride she's about to offer him will spark a chain of events that will challenge everything they both believe about love, trust, and the true value of wealth. This isn't just another rags to riches story. This is about how one rainy evening would teach a billionaire the one thing his money could never buy. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights of Joe's diner buzzed overhead as Sarah wiped down the counter for the 100th time that day. Her fingers, rough from years of dishwater and cleaning solution, moved mechanically across the worn surface. The morning rush had ended, leaving behind coffee rings and scattered crumbs that told stories of hurried business people and early rising. "Retirees, order up!" Mike, the cook who'd worked alongside her for the past 8 years, called out. His voice carried the same cheerful tone it always did, even though they both knew she'd been picking up extra shifts lately. Sarah grabbed a plate of eggs and hash browns, delivering it with a warm smile that had become her trademark. "Here you go, Mr. Patterson. Extra crispy, just how you like them." The elderly regular nodded in appreciation, his presence as much a part of the diner's morning routine as the sunrise itself. Between serving customers, Sarah's hand unconsciously drifted to her apron pocket, where the latest tuition bill from Washington State University lay folded. The paper had grown soft from her constantly touching it, as if frequent contact might somehow make the numbers smaller. $12,153 due for Amy's next semester. The amount haunted her waking moments, joining the symphony of other bills that played. On endless repeat in her mind, rent, utilities, car payment, insurance. Her daughter's voice echoed in her memory. "Mom, I can take a break, work for a year." But Sarah had shut that down immediately. Amy's education was non-negotiable. Her daughter wouldn't have to struggle the way she had, wouldn't have to watch opportunities slip away, because life had dealt her a different hand. Taking her lunch break in the narrow back office, Sarah pulled out her worn leather planner. Inside, carefully paper-clipped together, were the remnants of her attempts to make ends meet. A second job application for evening retail work she'd started last month, 3 credit card statements, all hovering near their limits, and a small photo of Amy at her high school graduation. In the picture, her daughter beamed with possibility, unaware of the hours her mother had spent that morning crying over how to afford the cap and gown. The diner's bell chimed, signaling new customers. Sarah tucked the bills away, straightened her name tag, and forced her worries behind the professional smile she'd perfected over 2 decades of service. She had 5 hours left of her shift, then 3 hours at the department store, and maybe, just maybe tonight, she'd figure out how to make the numbers add up differently. Rain began to tap against the diner's windows, a steady Seattle rhythm that had become the soundtrack to her life. Sarah watched the droplets race down the glass, remembering similar rainy days when Amy was small, when they'd sit together in their tiny apartment, making up stories about where the raindrops were going. Back then, even with all the hardship, there had been a certain magic in their little world of two. The evening shift was approaching, and with it, the decision that would change everything. Though Sarah didn't know it yet, she just knew she was tired, the bone-deep kind of tired that came from years of fighting to stay afloat, years of saying no to herself so she could say yes to her daughter's future. What she couldn't know was that sometimes life's biggest moments arrive precisely when we think we've run out of chances for them. Marcus Chen stood at the window of his modest studio apartment, watching Seattle's skyline disappear behind sheets of rain. Somewhere in that grey distance stood the Chen Technologies Tower, its 60 stories of glass and steel, a monument to everything he'd been trying to escape for the past year. He pulled out the worn leather wallet from his pocket, not the handcrafted Italian one that still sat in his penthouse safe, but the $20 Target special he'd bought on his first day of regular life. Inside, alongside $43 in carefully counted cash, sat his alter ego, Mark Chang, middle management IT consultant. The fake ID had cost more than he'd ever admit to his board of directors, but it had bought him something priceless: anonymity. He ran his thumb over the laminated surface, remembering the morning he decided to disappear. "Sir, the quarterly projections are exceptional," his CFO had announced during yet another soulless boardroom meeting. "Stock prices are up 12% this quarter alone." Around the table, faces had lit up with practiced enthusiasm, everyone nodding at exactly the right moments, laughing at exactly the right jokes. Later that day, at his mother's grave, Marcus had realized he couldn't remember the last time someone had spoken to him without wanting something. The rain intensified, drumming against the windows of his temporary home. The apartment was nothing like his penthouse. Water pressure that barely qualified as a drizzle, a refrigerator that hummed too loudly at night, and neighbors who argued about cat litter through paper-thin walls. Yet in the past year, he'd slept better here than he had in a decade. His phone buzzed. Another text from Jessica, his assistant, who was among the few who knew his secret. "Board meeting tomorrow at 9. Thompson asking questions about your sabbatical. How long can we keep this up?" Marcus slipped the phone back into his pocket without responding. Thompson, like the others, saw only the bottom line, not the hollowness that had driven him to this experiment in the first place. He straightened his deliberately unremarkable tie in the mirror. Polyester, bought on clearance. His suits these days were off the rack, chosen to blend in with middle management across the city. The man staring back at him looked nothing like the Marcus Chen, whose face occasionally still graced the business section of the Seattle Times. That Marcus wore bespoke suits and a carefully crafted expression of confident authority. This Marcus had worry lines around his eyes and a slight slouch that spoke of cubicle life. Looking at his watch, Timex, not Rolex, Marcus realized he was running late for his volunteer shift at the local tech education center. Teaching coding to kids from low-income neighborhoods had become the highlight of his weeks, not because it was charitable, but because the kids couldn't care less about his name or net worth. They cared only about whether he could help them make their games work. The nearest bus stop was 3 blocks away. Marcus grabbed his umbrella, which promptly turned inside out the moment he stepped outside. Perfect. His mother would have laughed at the sight of him now, her billionaire, and fighting with a $5 umbrella in the Seattle rain. She'd grown up poor in Guangzhou, and even after all their success, she'd never lost her appreciation for life's humbling moments. Giving up on the umbrella, Marcus began walking, his non-designer shoes slowly soaking through. He could have called a car, could have reached into his other wallet, the one in his safe, and summoned any number of luxuries, but that would defeat the purpose of everything this year had been about. A taxi splashed past, ignoring his hail. Marcus stood there, rain dripping down his collar, and felt something he hadn't experienced in years: helplessness. It was uncomfortable, humbling, and somehow exactly what he'd been looking for. In that moment, as headlights approached through the rain, he had no idea he was about to meet someone who would make him question everything he thought this year of anonymity had taught him. Sarah's windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the downpour as she guided her aging Honda Civic through Seattle's rain-slicked streets. Her mind was still on the tuition bill when she spotted him, a solitary figure in a dark suit, looking more drowned rat than businessman. Something about his posture, the way he stood there accepting the rain's assault with quiet resignation, made her foot ease off the gas. "You're being ridiculous," she muttered to herself even as she pulled over. The photo of Amy smiled at her from the dashboard, her daughter's graduation tassel dangling beside it. What would Amy say about her mother picking up strangers in this weather? Probably the same thing she always said, that her mum's heart was too big for her own good. The man approached her passenger window, and Sarah hit the button to roll it down, immediately regretting it as rain spattered the interior. "Need a ride?" She called out, trying to sound confident, despite the voice in her head listing all the ways this could be a bad idea. "That's very kind, but I couldn't impose," he replied, his voice carrying a gentle tone that seemed at odds with his drenched appearance. Water streamed from his hair, down a face that looked both tired and unexpectedly trustworthy. "You're not imposing if I'm offering," Sarah heard herself say. "Besides, you look like you could use a break from the weather." She gestured to the passenger seat, where only moments before her uniform for her second job had been sitting. "I'm heading downtown, if that helps." After a moment's hesitation, he opened the door and slid in, immediately apologetic about the water he was bringing with him. "I'm Mark," he said, careful to sit in a way that would minimize the damage to her car seat. "Thank you for this." My umbrella turned out to be more optimistic than practical. Sarah noticed how he arranged himself to take up as little space as possible, his briefcase held tight against his legs. "I'm Sarah," she replied, pulling back into traffic. "And don't worry about the seat. It's seen worse. My daughter once spilled an entire strawberry milkshake back in high school." The mention of Amy prompted her usual glance at the dashboard. Photo, a habit so ingrained she didn't realize she was doing it. Mark followed her gaze, and something in his expression softened. "Your daughter?" "Yeah, she's in college now. Washington State." Pride crept into her voice, as it always did when she talked about Amy. "Engineering major." "That's impressive," Mark said, and unlike the usual polite responses she got, his interest seemed genuine. "What kind of engineering?" "Environmental. She wants to work on sustainable energy solutions." Sarah merged onto the highway, where traffic was already backing up despite the hour. "She's always been the smart one. Gets these ideas in her head and won't let go until she figures them out." A small smile played across Mark's face. "Sounds like she takes after her mother. It takes a special kind of determination to stop for a stranger in weather like this." Sarah laughed, the sound surprising her with its ease. "Or a special kind of foolishness. My daughter would probably say both." The traffic ahead came to a complete stop, red brake lights reflecting off the wet pavement. Mark glanced at his watch, but showed no sign of impatience. Instead, he seemed almost relieved by the delay. "So, what do you do, Mark?" Sarah asked, filling what might have been an awkward silence. He hesitated for just a moment. "IT consulting, nothing exciting. Mostly helping companies figure out their technical problems." He turned the question back to her. "And you?" "Everything exciting," she quipped. "Waitressing at Joe's Diner by day, retail at Davidson's department, store by night, living the dream, one double shift at a time." Something flickered in Mark's eyes, not pity, which Sarah had grown to recognize and resent, but something deeper, almost like recognition. "2 jobs can't be easy. Easier than watching my daughter give up on her dreams." The words came out, before Sarah could filter them, more honest than she'd meant to be with a stranger. "Sorry, that was more personal than you probably wanted to hear." "No, please don't apologize," Mark said quietly. "It's refreshing to hear someone speak so honestly about their life." The traffic inched forward, and Sarah noticed Mark staring at his reflection in the passenger window as if seeing himself from a new angle. In the dashboard photo, Amy's frozen smile seemed to take on a knowing quality, as if her daughter had somehow anticipated this moment when she'd insisted on putting the picture there. The rain intensified to the point where even the highest setting on the wipers couldn't keep up. Through the blurred windshield, the tail lights ahead looked like smeared red watercolors. Sarah leaned forward, squinting to make out the road. Maybe we should pull over until it lets up, Mark suggested, his voice gentle but concerned. There's a diner just ahead. Mel's, I think. Sarah knew Mel's. It was a competitor to Joe's, but she had to admit they made better coffee. Probably wise, she agreed, carefully steering toward the exit. No sense risking it in weather like this. The diner's neon sign cut through the grey curtain of rain, its promise of warmth and coffee suddenly irresistible. They made a dash for the entrance, but the 20 feet from car to door was enough to leave them both dripping. Inside, the warmth wrapped around them like a blanket. The place was nearly empty, just a couple of truckers at the counter and an elderly couple in a corner booth. A waitress who looked about Sarah's age approached with menus and a knowing smile. "Weather's something else out there," she said, leading them to a booth by the window. "Coffee to start, please," they said in unison, then shared a small laugh at the synchronicity. Mark pulled out a napkin from the dispenser and began absent-mindedly sketching on it with a pen from his pocket. Sarah noticed his hands, no ring, but also no tan line where one might have been. His fingers moved across the paper with practiced precision, creating what looked like the beginnings of a building. "Design. You're an artist?" she asked, nodding toward his drawing. He quickly set down the pen, as if caught doing something he shouldn't. "No, just a habit. Sometimes sketching helps me think." He hesitated, then slid the napkin toward her. The sketch showed a small storefront with large windows and what appeared to be tables inside. "I always wanted to open a place where people could just be. No pretense, no agenda." Sarah studied the drawing. "Looks like a cafe, a community space," he corrected, then seemed embarrassed by his own enthusiasm. "Somewhere between a cafe and a library, I suppose, where people could connect without pressure." He paused as the waitress returned with their coffee. "Probably sounds foolish." Sarah wrapped her hands around the warm mug, remembering similar dreams she'd sketched on diner napkins years ago. "No, it doesn't. Dreams never sound foolish to the right audience." Mark looked at her with an intensity that made her want to check her reflection, as if he was seeing something in her face that she couldn't. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Say exactly the right thing without trying." He took a sip of his coffee, wincing slightly at the heat. "Most people I talk to, they calculate every word." The rain drummed against the window beside them, creating a private atmosphere in their little corner of the diner. Sarah found herself relaxing, the day's worries temporarily muted by this strange interlude. "Maybe you're just talking to the wrong people," she said, surprising herself with her boldness. "Or maybe they're seeing the version of you they think they're supposed to see." Something shifted in Mark's expression, a crack in whatever careful facade he maintained. He picked up the pen again, adding more details to his sketch. People at tables, books on shelves, a counter with bar stools. His dreams taking shape in blue ink on white paper. "My mother would have liked you," he said quietly, still focused on his drawing. "She always said the richest conversations happen in the simplest places." Sarah watched his hands move across the napkin, noticed the way he kept his shoulders slightly hunched, as if trying to take up less space in the world. Despite his ordinary clothes and unassuming manner, there was something about him that didn't quite fit, like a puzzle piece that matched the picture, but not the shape. The elderly couple paid their bill and headed out into the now lightening rain, leaving the diner feeling even more intimate. The waitress refilled their cups without asking, recognizing perhaps that this was a conversation that needed more time. "Tell me about your daughter," Mark said, setting aside his pen. "What made her choose environmental engineering?" And just like that, they fell into the kind of conversation that only seems possible between strangers who might never meet again. Honest, unguarded, real. The rain had settled into a gentle patter when they finally left the diner. During their conversation, Mark had found himself repeatedly reaching for his phone, where Jessica's urgent messages accumulated like small warnings. Each time, he'd stopped himself, unwilling to break the spell of normalcy that had settled around them. Amy was 11, when she first got interested in environmental science, Sarah was saying as they walked back to her car. There was this oil spill on the news, and she spent weeks researching ways to clean it up. Built this whole presentation about it for her science fair. Did she win? Mark asked, already knowing the answer from the pride in Sarah's voice. First place. Use the prize money to buy more science books. Sarah unlocked the car doors. That's when I knew she was going to change the world someday. As they settled back into the car, Mark's phone buzzed again. This time, he couldn't ignore it. The message made his stomach tighten. Emergency board meeting called for tomorrow. Morning. Thompson's demanding answers about the company's direction. We need you here, MC. Sarah noticed his change in expression. Everything okay? Just work, he said, the half-truth bitter in his mouth. Sometimes I think technology makes it impossible to ever really be away. Tell me about it, Sarah laughed. Amy sends me cat videos at all hours, says they're vital to my emotional well-being. She pulled back onto the road, which was less crowded now, though I suspect she just wants to make sure I'm not working too hard. Mark watched her profile in the dim light, saw the softness that came into her expression whenever she mentioned her daughter. It was real, uncalculated, everything his world wasn't. Another message lit up his phone, projected stock valuations, acquisition proposals, shareholder concerns. The parallel lives he'd been maintaining were suddenly colliding, and he wasn't sure which one was the lie anymore. You know, Sarah said, misreading his silence, sometimes I think I talk too much about Amy. Feel free to tell me to stop. Please don't, he said quickly. It's refreshing to hear someone talk about what really matters to them. In his other life, conversations revolved around market shares and profit margins, everyone carefully positioning themselves for advantage. They were approaching the downtown area now, buildings rising around them like shadows in the night. Mark knew he should direct her to the modest apartment building where Mark Chang supposedly lived, but something made him hesitate. A few more blocks would take them into the heart of the financial district, where Marcus Chen's penthouse occupied. The top floor of a building his company owned. My stop is just ahead, he said instead, pointing to a corner where at least he could walk to his apartment without Sarah seeing exactly where he went. Thank you for everything. Sarah pulled over, and for a moment they sat in silence. You know, she said finally, you seem like you could use someone to talk to yourself. Someone who's not sending you work messages at all hours. Before he could respond, his phone lit up again. This time Sarah caught a glimpse of the screen and the name that flashed across it. Her expression changed, just slightly, but enough for Mark to know she'd seen something that didn't align with his story. I should explain, he started, but Sarah held up a hand. We all have our reasons for keeping things to ourselves, she said, and he heard in her voice the wisdom of someone who'd learned to accept life's complications. It was nice meeting you, Mark, if that's your name. The understanding in her tone made it worse somehow. He opened his mouth to tell her everything, to explain about the year of living undercover, about his search for something real in a world of facades. Instead, he found himself saying, "It was nice meeting you too, Sarah. Your daughter is lucky to have you." As he stepped out into the night, Marcus, felt the weight of his two lives pressing down on him. Behind him, Sarah's car pulled away, taking with it perhaps the most honest conversation he'd had in years. His phone buzzed again, the real world demanding his attention, but for a moment he stood in the light rain, holding on to the feeling of being just another person sharing coffee and dreams in a late-night diner. Sarah drove slowly through the financial district, her mind replaying the glimpse she'd caught of Mark's phone. The message had been addressed to MC, not exactly damning evidence, but combined with his careful way of speaking, his education that occasionally slipped through. And now this neighborhood, something wasn't adding up. At a red light, she pulled out her phone and quickly searched MC Seattle business. The screen filled with hits about Marcus Chen, the reclusive tech billionaire who'd supposedly taken a sabbatical last year. There was even a newspaper article. Chen Technologies CEO's extended absence raises questions. The light turned green, and Sarah put her phone away, her thoughts churning. She'd seen Mark's sketch on the diner napkin, not just a dream of a cafe, but an architect's precision in every line. The way he'd talked about his mother, about wanting a place where people could be real, it all took on a different meaning. Now, her eyes caught a massive building ahead, its top floors disappearing into the low clouds. The Chen Technologies logo glowed subtly against the night sky, a testament to the power and wealth she'd been casually chatting with over coffee. A group of well-dressed people emerged from the building's lobby, and Sarah instinctively slowed down. Among them was a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, gesturing emphatically. As she passed, she heard snippets of their conversation. Can't keep operating without clear leadership. Marcus needs to... The rest was lost to the night. But Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The man she'd picked up, whether he was Mark or Marcus, had been genuine in that diner. His loneliness, his desire for authentic connection, had been real. Money, she knew from years of serving wealthy customers, couldn't buy that kind of sincerity. She thought about Amy, about all the times they'd watched movies where rich people went undercover to learn about real life. They'd always laughed at how unrealistic it seemed. Yet here she was, living what felt like the plot of one of those movies. At home, Sarah settled into her small but comfortable apartment. The evening shift at Davidson's had been cancelled due to a scheduling mix-up, giving her a rare night off. She should have been relieved, but instead she felt unsettled. Opening her laptop, she typed Marcus Chen into the search bar. Images filled the screen. Most were from business events or tech conferences, showing a man in expensive suits with perfect posture. But one photo caught her eye. It was from a charity event 3 years ago, showing Marcus Chen in a more relaxed moment, laughing at something off camera. Without the stiff formality of his business photos, without the careful disguise he'd worn tonight, she could see Mark in his features. "Well," she said to Amy's framed photo on her desk, "your mom definitely had an interesting night." Her phone buzzed with a text from Amy. "How was work? Did anything exciting happen?" Sarah stared at the message, a laugh bubbling up in her throat. What could she say? That she'd had coffee with a billionaire who was pretending to be an IT consultant? That she'd probably given one of the richest men in Seattle a ride in her Honda Civic with the broken AC? "Just the usual," she typed back. "Tell me about your classes instead." As Amy launched into a detailed description of her latest environmental engineering project, Sarah found her thoughts drifting back to the diner. She remembered the way Marcus had looked while sketching his dream cafe. Not like a CEO worth billions, but like anyone else sharing their hopes over a cup of coffee. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here was a man who could buy any cafe. He wanted probably buy the entire chain of Mel's diners if he felt like it, sketching his dream on a napkin like a college student planning their future. There was something both sad and touching about it. All that money, and what he really wanted was something as simple as genuine human connection. Morning light filtered through the windows of Joe's diner as Sarah mechanically refilled coffee. Cups, her mind elsewhere. The magazine she'd found in the break room lay folded on the counter, Marcus Chen's face staring up from its glossy cover. "Tech's most enigmatic bachelor takes break from billion-dollar empire," the headline declared. She'd read the article 3 times already, each word adding another piece to the puzzle. "Earth to Sarah," Mike called from the kitchen window. "Order's getting cold." She startled, quickly grabbing the plate. "Sorry, Mike, just distracted." "You've been distracted all morning," he observed. "Everything okay with Amy?" "Yeah, she's fine." Sarah delivered the breakfast special to table 4, then returned to the counter where the magazine waited. The article painted Marcus Chen as a brilliant but isolated figure, known for avoiding public appearances even before his sabbatical. There was a quote from a former colleague. Marcus was always searching for something beyond success. Money never seemed to be his driving force. Her phone vibrated in her apron pocket. Another text from Amy. "Mom, you won't believe what I just found. That guy you mentioned, the one you gave a ride to, I think he might be—" Sarah had to smile at her daughter's detective work. Amy had always been too clever for her own good. After their conversation last night, she must have picked up on something in Sarah's voice, some hint that there was more to the story. The diner's bell chimed, and Sarah looked up to see a sharply dressed woman in her 30s enter, her eyes scanning the room with purpose. She moved with the kind of confidence that came from expensive clothes and executive positions, making her stand out among the diner's regular morning crowd. "I'm looking for Sarah Martinez," the woman announced, approaching the counter. "I believe we need to talk." Sarah's stomach tightened. "I'm Sarah. Jessica Chen, Chief of Staff for Chen Technologies." She placed a business card on the counter. "Is there somewhere we can speak privately?" In the break room, Jessica didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Mr. Chen has been pursuing a personal project this past year, a project that requires discretion." "You mean living like a normal person?" Sarah couldn't keep the edge from her voice. "Having actual conversations with people who don't want anything from him." Jessica's professional mask slipped just slightly. "You understand then?" "I understand that he's lonely," Sarah said, thinking of the man who'd sketched his dreams on a diner napkin. "And that all your discretion and damage control probably isn't helping with that." "Ms. Martinez—" "Look," Sarah interrupted, "I'm not going to tell anyone about Marcus, whoever he needs to be. Not because of any legal agreement you're probably about to offer me, but because everyone deserves a chance to figure out who they really are." Jessica studied her for a long moment. "He said you'd say something like that." She reached into her briefcase and withdrew an envelope. "Mr. Chen asked me to give you this. He also wants you to know that he meant everything he said last night." After Jessica left, Sarah waited until her break to open the envelope. Inside was the napkin from Mel's diner, the sketch of the cafe carefully preserved. Below the drawing, in the same precise handwriting, was a note. "Some dreams are worth pursuing no matter who you are. Thank you for reminding me of that." MC Sarah traced the lines of the sketch with her finger, remembering the way he'd talked about creating a space for real connections. She thought about Amy, about dreams and the cost of pursuing them, about authenticity in a world of carefully crafted images. The diner's bell chimed again, and she tucked the napkin carefully into her apron pocket. Whatever game of hidden identities Marcus Chen was playing, she had her own life to live, her own dreams to chase, yet something told her their paths weren't done crossing, not when they'd both recognized in each other that same hunger for something real. That evening, Sarah sat cross-legged on her bed with her laptop, Amy's excited voice coming through the phone on speaker. "Mom, do you realize who he is? Marcus Chen revolutionized renewable energy storage. We're studying his company's battery technology in my environmental systems class." Sarah scrolled through article after article, each one revealing another layer of the man she'd known briefly as Mark. "I'm looking at that right now, sweetie. There's so much here. His company's research grant literally pays for half my department's projects," Amy continued, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. "And you just gave him a ride in your car?" "Trust me, I'm still processing that part." Sarah clicked on a video. Interview from 3 years ago. Marcus Chen stood at a podium, discussing his company's commitment to sustainable technology. His posture was different, straight-backed, commanding, but she caught glimpses of Mark in his gestures, in the way his eyes seemed to search the crowd for something genuine. "But why was he pretending to be someone else?" Amy asked. "I mean, he could do anything he wants, go anywhere." Sarah thought about the napkin sketch, now safely tucked in her drawer. "Maybe that's exactly why. When you can do anything, how do you know what's real?" "Mom," Amy's tone turned serious, "you're not going to get in trouble for this, are you? I mean, with that woman who came to see you." "No, honey. Actually, Sarah paused at a new article that popped up. Chen Technologies announces major investment in community education initiatives. The date was from just that morning. I think something interesting is happening. She opened another tab, finding an online profile about Marcus's background. Unlike most tech billionaires, he hadn't come from wealth. His mother had raised him alone, working multiple jobs, not unlike Sarah herself. The parallel made her pause. Amy, remember that project you did in high school, the one about the oil spill? Yeah, why? Did you know Chen Technologies has an environmental cleanup division? They've developed some revolutionary methods for... Sarah trailed off, her eyes catching on a particular detail. The division had been started shortly after Marcus's mother passed away, dedicated in her memory. Mom, you still there? Just thinking. Sarah opened her email, something forming in her mind. Hey, sweetie, I need to do something. Call you tomorrow? After. Hanging up, Sarah stared at the blank email composition page. The address jessica.chenerchentechnologies.com seemed to glow on her screen. She began to type, Dear Miss Chen, I know this might seem presumptuous, but I have an idea I'd like to share with Mr. Chen. It's about combining his interest in community spaces with environmental education. She worked on the email for over an hour, drawing on everything she'd learned about both versions of Marcus Chen, the billionaire innovator and the man who sketched dreams on napkins. She wrote about Amy's passion for environmental engineering, about the lack of accessible science education in working-class communities, about the power of giving people spaces to learn and connect. Before she could second-guess herself, Sarah hit send. Then she opened one last article from earlier that evening. Chen Technologies CEO returns to public role, announces new community-focused initiative. The photo showed Marcus at a press conference, looking more like the man she'd met in the rain than the polished executive from earlier interviews. The article quoted him, Sometimes you have to step away from everything you know to see what's really needed. Sarah closed her laptop, exhausted, but unable to sleep. Somewhere in this city, a billionaire was trying to bridge two worlds. And, somehow, she'd become part of that story. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your email to Jessica was forwarded to me. I'd like to discuss your idea. MC Sarah found herself back at Mel's diner the next evening, this time sitting across from Marcus Chen himself, not Mark the IT consultant, but the real man, though he wore the same humble demeanor she remembered. His suit was expensive but understated, as if he were trying to find a middle ground between his two identities. I want to apologize, he began, turning his coffee cup slowly in his hands. For the deception. Which part? Sarah asked. The fake name, the made-up job, or having your chief of staff check up on me? A hint of a smile touched his lips. All of it. Though Jessica came to see you on her own, she's protective, I noticed. Sarah pulled out the napkin sketch from her purse, smoothing it on the table between them. Was any of it real? Marcus looked at the drawing, his expression softening. This was. That's why I wanted you to have it. He met her eyes. Everything I said that night was true, Sarah. The only lies were about my name and job. The waitress, different from their last visit, approached with fresh coffee. She did a double take at Marcus, clearly recognizing him, but professionally maintained her composure. After she left, Sarah leaned forward. Why did you do it? Live like someone else for a year? Because Marcus Chen couldn't have a normal conversation with anyone. His voice carried a weight she hadn't heard in Mark's. Every interaction was colored by who I was, what I could do for people, what they wanted from me. Even genuine people changed when they knew who they were talking to. So you became Mark. I became myself, just without the baggage of being Marcus Chen. He gestured to the diner around them. Places like this, conversations like we had, they're impossible in my normal life. Do you know you're the first person in years who talked to me about their dreams without asking for funding? Sarah thought about the email she'd sent, feeling suddenly self-conscious. And now here I am, pitching you an idea about helping. Others dream bigger, he corrected. There's a difference. He pulled out his own copy of the napkin sketch, more worn than hers. I've been carrying this around, wondering if it was possible to merge both worlds. The resources of Marcus Chen with the authenticity of Mark Chang. And then I got your email. He smiled fully now, looking more like the man from the rain. A community space that combines environmental education with real human connection. Exactly what I sketched, but with a purpose beyond my own sense of isolation. A business card appeared on the table between them. Crisp, elegant, with the Chen Technologies logo. I'd like you to help me build it, Sarah. Not just one location, but a network of them. Places where kids like Amy can learn about environmental science, where communities can gather, where people can be real, Sarah finished, thinking of their previous conversation. Yes. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I've spent a year learning how to be genuine again. But you never forgot. Everything you do, from picking up strangers in the rain to working 2 jobs for your daughter's dreams. It's all authentically you. Sarah picked up the business card, its weight somehow significant in her hand. You know this changes things, our whole dynamic. I know. Marcus nodded. But maybe that's good. Maybe it's time for Mark Chang and Marcus Chen to become the same person. With some help, the diner's bell chimed as new customers entered, the sound reminding Sarah of that first rainy night. You really want to do this? Build something real? Only if you'll help keep it real. He extended his hand across the table, not the polished CEO, not the pretend IT consultant, but something in between, something true. Partners? Sarah looked at his offered hand, thinking about dreams sketched on napkins and chances that came disguised as rainy nights. She thought about Amy, about opportunities and authenticity, about the possibility of helping others find their own paths. Marcus pulled an old photograph from his wallet, not the fake one he'd carried as Mark, but his real wallet. The picture showed a young boy and his mother standing in front of a small convenience store, both smiling despite their obvious exhaustion. This was our first business, he said, sliding the photo across the table. Mom worked 16-hour days to keep it running. She'd helped me with homework between customers, taught me math by counting inventory. Sarah studied the image, seeing echoes of both Mark and Marcus in the boy's face. She raised you alone? After my father left? Yes. He traced the edge of the photo with his finger. She never let it defeat her, though. Always said every setback was just a setup for something better. The diner had emptied out, leaving them in a bubble of quiet, broken only by the distant clatter of dishes from the kitchen. Outside, the Seattle rain had returned, painting the windows with liquid light. She was the one who encouraged me to study computer science, Marcus continued. We couldn't afford much, but she managed to buy me my first computer, ancient even then, barely ran. I took it apart and rebuilt it so many times, she joked I should start charging the neighbors for repairs. Did you? Actually, yes. He smiled. At the memory. That was my first real business, fixed computers for everyone in our apartment building. $20 a repair, though Mom usually ended up letting people pay in installments or with home-cooked meals. Sarah thought about her own struggles, about the creative ways she'd made ends meet over the years. Sounds familiar. I used to do hair for the other waitresses during our breaks. $5 a trim, $10 for a real style. What happened to the store? She asked, nodding toward the photo. Marcus's expression shifted, a shadow crossing his features. Chain store opened. Up 2 blocks away, couldn't compete with their prices. Mom. He paused, collecting himself. She never let me see how much it hurt her, just said it was time for a new chapter. He pulled out another photo, this one showing his mother in a graduation gown, beaming proudly. She went back to school while working 3 jobs. Said if we couldn't own the store anymore, we'd own something bigger someday. She lived to see your success? Some of it. Marcus's voice softened. She saw the company's first patent, our first major contract. The day we could finally afford real office space. She brought everyone dumplings she'd made herself, hundreds of them. Said no matter how big we got, we should never forget where we came from. Sarah heard the echo of her own values in his words, understanding now why he'd responded so strongly to her story about Amy. That's why you stepped away, isn't it? To remember? Partly. He straightened in his seat, and Sarah could see him struggling to merge his 2 identities, the boy from the convenience store and the billionaire CEO. Success has a way of building walls. Every achievement, every zero added to the bank account felt like another layer between me and the world Mom taught me to value, between who I was and who I'd become. And who are you now? Sarah asked softly. Marcus looked at the 2 photos side by side, the struggling family at the convenience store and the proud mother at graduation. Someone trying to honor both. And parts of my story, the year I spent as Mark, it reminded me that real connections don't care about bank accounts. You taught me that too. I didn't teach you anything, Sarah protested. I just gave you a ride. You gave me honesty, showed me it was still possible. He gathered the photos, tucking them carefully away. That's why I need your help with this project. You understand both sides, the struggle and the dream, the practical and the possible. The rain intensified outside, much like the night they'd first met. Sarah watched the streaks on the window, thinking about circles closing and new ones beginning. Your mother would be proud, she said finally, not of the success, though that too, but of you finding your way back to what matters. Marcus's eyes met hers, and for a moment she saw all of him, Mark and Marcus, past and present, the convenience store boy and the tech visionary. Thank you, he said simply. And in those 2 words, Sarah heard the foundation of their future. Partnership being laid, Amy burst through the apartment door in a whirlwind of energy, dropping her college backpack by the entrance. Mom, why didn't you tell me everything on the phone? Marcus Chen, the Marcus Chen. Sarah looked up from her laptop where she'd been reviewing project proposals. Hello to you too, sweetheart. How was the drive from school? Don't change the subject. Amy flopped onto the couch, her eyes bright with excitement. I literally just finished a paper citing his company's research, and you're casually working with him. This is insane. It's not that dramatic, Sarah said, closing her laptop. We're just developing a community education program. Just developing. Amy sat up straight. Mom, do you know what this could mean? His environmental initiatives are revolutionary, and now you're helping shape them? She pulled out her phone, scrolling rapidly. Look, I just got an email about a summer internship program at Chen Technologies. The timing can't be a coincidence. Sarah moved to sit beside her daughter. Actually, it is. Marcus doesn't know you applied. Marcus, Amy repeated, grinning. You're on a first-name basis with one of the most influential innovators in sustainable technology. This is better than that time my high school science project won state finals. Speaking of which, Sarah retrieved the worn newspaper clipping about Amy's victory from the shelf. That project might have helped inspire some of this. Amy took the clipping, her expression softening. The oil spill cleanup? But that was years ago. Sometimes old dreams find new ways to grow. Sarah hesitated, then shared the story of the napkin sketch, the rain-soaked evening, and the unexpected connection that followed. So he was just pretending to be normal, living like a regular person. Amy's voice held more curiosity than judgment. That's actually kind of sad, isn't it? Being so successful that you have to hide who you are to have real conversations. Sarah was struck by her daughter's insight. That's exactly what he was trying to escape. You know what this reminds me of? Amy curled up on the couch, looking suddenly younger. Those nights when you'd come home exhausted from double shifts, but you'd still help me with science homework. You never made me feel like our dreams were too big, even when we could barely afford the basics. Amy, no, Mom, listen. She pulled up another email on her phone, the internship acceptance letter she hadn't mentioned yet. I got in. Full. Paid position in their environmental engineering department. But I was worried about taking it, thinking maybe they only chose me because of your connection. Sarah started to protest, but Amy continued. Then I read the acceptance notes. They specifically mentioned my oil spill project from high school, my current research focus. They didn't even know we were related when they selected me. Pride swelled in Sarah's chest. Of course they didn't. You earned this on your own merit, just like you earned your place in this project with Marcus. Amy's smile turned mischievous. Though I have to ask, is he as intimidating in person as everyone says? Sarah thought about the man who sketched dreams on diner napkins, who carried old photos in his wallet and understood the value of authenticity. Actually, he's just someone trying to make a difference, like we all are. Mom, Amy's voice turned serious. I think this is really good. Not just the opportunity stuff, but you seem different. More excited about something that's just yours. Not just about making my dreams possible. Sarah hugged her daughter, marveling at when exactly she'd grown so wise. Maybe it's time for both our dreams to come true. Amy's phone buzzed. Another email from Chen Technologies about orientation details. As she read it aloud, Sarah thought about circles completing. Her daughter's childhood passion for environmental science, Marcus's search for authenticity, her own delayed dreams of making a difference. Sometimes the longest roads led exactly where you needed to go. The conference room at Chen Technologies felt worlds away from Joe's diner. Sarah sat at the gleaming table, examining the business proposal Marcus had just placed before her. The document was thick, professionally bound, with her name embossed on the cover, Community Education Initiative, Project Director, Sarah Martinez. I don't understand, she said, looking up at Marcus, who stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seattle. Project Director? He turned from the view, and she noticed he was wearing the same kind of unremarkable tie he'd worn as Mark. A small detail, but it made her smile. You're the perfect person to lead this, he said. You understand both the practical needs and the human element. Sarah flipped through the proposal. The numbers made her head spin. A budget that could fund dozens of centers across the city, each combining environmental education with community gathering spaces. This is a lot of responsibility. Less than raising a daughter alone while working 2 jobs, Marcus pointed out, taking the seat beside her. Less than keeping your dreams alive while making someone else's possible. That's different, is it? He reached for the proposal, turning to a specific page. Look at the operational model. Each center will need someone exactly like you, someone who understands struggle but never loses sight of possibility. Who better to develop that than someone who's lived it? Sarah studied the page, her food service management experience kicking in. The cafe sections would need to be self-sustaining, she mused, and the class schedules should accommodate working parents. You're already thinking like a director, Marcus said softly. She closed the proposal, her hands flat on its surface. I don't have the educational background for this. No degree, no corporate experience. No preconceptions about how things should be done, Marcus finished. No corporate habits to unlearn, just pure understanding of what communities actually need. He pulled out a familiar napkin, his original sketch. Sometimes the best qualifications aren't the ones that come with certificates. Sarah thought about Amy, about all the local kids who couldn't afford extra science classes or summer camps, about parents working multiple jobs, dreaming of better opportunities for their children. I'd want to start small, she said slowly. 1 center prove the concept. Already thought of that. Marcus handed her another document, plans for renovating an old bookstore just 3 blocks from Joe's diner. The pilot location, if you want it. The plans showed exactly what they'd discussed. A bright, welcoming space with areas for studying, a cafe, classroom spaces for workshops. In the margins, someone had sketched small additions. A children's corner with science exhibits, a community bulletin board, comfortable seating areas designed for conversation. "You did this already?" Sarah asked, recognizing some of her offhand suggestions from their previous discussions. "I had the architects incorporate every idea you mentioned." He smiled. "You've been directing this project since that first night. In the rain, this just makes it official." Sarah stood, walking to the windows. The city spread out below, and she could just make out Joe's diner in the distance. "I'd have to quit my jobs," she said, more to herself than to Marcus. "Yes, learn a whole new skill set. Yes, trust that I can do this." Marcus joined her at the window. "That part I already know you can do." He pointed to a group of students entering the public library across the street. "Think about them. Think about what a place like you're imagining could mean for their futures." Sarah thought about her own path, the long hours, the delayed dreams, the choices made for survival rather than growth. She thought about Amy, flourishing now because someone had believed in her potential. Maybe it was time to help others find that same belief in themselves. "If we do this," she said, turning to face Marcus, "it has to stay real. No corporate polish that makes people feel unwelcome. No barriers that keep out the ones who need it most. That's exactly why it needs to be you." He extended his hand, just as he had in the diner. "Partners?" This time, Sarah took his hand without hesitation. "Partners, but I'm keeping my uniform from Joe's to remind us both what we're really building here." Marcus grinned, the same genuine smile she'd first seen in the rain. "I wouldn't have it any other way." The headline in the Seattle Times read, "Tech Billionaire's Mystery Woman, Waitress Turned Executive." Below it was a grainy photo of Sarah leaving Chen Technologies, Marcus holding the door for her. The article had run that morning, and by noon, Joe's diner was packed with reporters pretending to be customers while sneaking photos on their phones. "Order up," Mike called from the kitchen, his voice carrying a protective edge. He'd been running interference all morning, accidentally blocking shots and spilling water on any phones left carelessly on tables. Sarah moved through the crowd with practiced ease, delivering plates while ignoring the not-so-subtle questions tossed her way. Her phone buzzed constantly in her apron pocket. Interview requests, social media notifications, and messages from old acquaintances suddenly remembering their connection. "Is it true you're dating Marcus Chen? How did you really meet him?" Sources say you're his long-lost sister. The theories got wilder with each passing hour. Sarah maintained her smile, kept pouring coffee, and said nothing. This was her last week at Joe's, and she wouldn't let tabloid gossip ruin it. Her phone buzzed again. Marcus this time. "Turn on the news." In the break room, Sarah found Mike already watching the small TV they kept for slow days. A polished anchor was mid-sentence. Sources close to Chen Technologies expressed concern over the appointment of an untrained individual to such a significant position. The company's stock has dropped 3 points since the announcement. "That's garbage," Mike growled, protectively stepping between Sarah and a reporter who tried to follow her into the break room. "You're the most capable person I know." Sarah's phone lit up with another message, this one from Amy. "Mom, don't let them get to you. Check your email." The email contained a link to a social media post that was rapidly going viral. Someone had shared a photo of Sarah from years ago, helping a homeless teenager who used to visit the diner. The caption read, "Before she made headlines, Sarah Martinez was already changing lives. She gave my brother free meals when we couldn't afford food, helped him apply for job training. Today, he's a successful mechanic. That's the kind of person we need running community programs." More stories began flooding in. Regular customers, from Joe's sharing memories of her kindness, parents posting about times she'd helped their kids with homework between serving tables, former co-workers describing her ability to manage chaos with grace. The bell above the diner's door chimed, and Sarah looked up to see Marcus walking in, dressed in his Mark Chang outfit, complete with the unremarkable tie. The reporters swiveled as one, cameras raising. "Your usual table's open," Sarah said loudly, playing along. He settled into the booth where they'd first really talked, and she brought him coffee without being asked. "Quite a circus," he observed, quietly as she poured. "I'm sorry about this. Don't be." She slid into the seat across from him, aware of the cameras capturing every moment but no longer caring. "We knew this would happen." The stock drop wasn't part of the plan. "No," Sarah agreed, "but it's not about stock prices, is it? It's about that." She nodded toward a young girl in a nearby booth, working on what looked like science homework, while her mother, still in her housekeeping uniform, looked on proudly. Marcus followed her gaze, his expression softening. "You're right, as usual." He pulled out his phone, showing her a draft of a press release. "I thought we might accelerate the timeline, announce the first center's opening date, get ahead of the gossip." Sarah studied the release, then looked around at her diner, at the familiar faces mixed in with the intrusive reporters. "I have a better idea," she said. "Why don't we show them instead of tell them?" She stood, addressing the room at large. "Since you're all here anyway, who'd like to hear about what we're actually building?" The reporters leaned in, cameras ready. But Sarah wasn't looking at them. She was watching the regular customers, the families, the people whose lives this project was meant to touch. Marcus stood beside her, and in that moment they were neither billionaire and waitress nor CEO and director, but simply two people sharing a dream that had grown too big to hold alone. Sarah stared at the stack of letters on her new desk at Chen Technologies, each one more vitriolic than the last. Gold digger, social climber, unqualified. The words blurred together, a chorus of judgment from people who'd never met her. Outside her office, construction crews were already at work on the first community center, but these letters threatened to drown out the sound of progress with their noise. "You don't have to read those," Jessica said from the doorway. Marcus's chief of staff had become an unexpected ally, fielding press inquiries and running interference with board members who questioned Sarah's appointment. "Yes, I do." Sarah held up one particularly nasty letter from a society columnist. "Because for every person who writes these, there's someone out there afraid to chase their dreams because they think they don't belong." Jessica moved into the office, closing the door behind her. "Marcus is getting pressure from some major shareholders. They're concerned about the company's image, the stock volatility. They're concerned I don't fit their idea of what an executive should look like," Sarah finished. She stood, walking to the window that overlooked the construction site. "You know what I see down there? I see my mom, 25 years ago, working as a housekeeper in a building just like this one. Never got to rest, never got to dream. Just survived." She turned back to Jessica. "That's who we're building this for. Not the shareholders, not the society columnists. For the people who deserve a chance to do more than survive." Her computer pinged with an email notification, another message from the board, requesting her presence at an emergency meeting. Before she could respond, Marcus appeared in her doorway. "Don't answer that," he said, his expression determined. "We're going on a field trip." 20 minutes later, they stood in front of Joe's diner, where Sarah had spent her last day just a week ago. Through the window they could see Mike training his new waitress, showing the same patience he'd once shown Sarah. "Why are we here?" Sarah asked. "Because you need to remember who you are." Marcus led her inside, nodding to Mike as they took their usual booth. "When I was living as Mark, no one questioned my right to exist in any space. But the real me, every move is scrutinized, every decision questioned. You're facing that now. Because of me. Because of us," Sarah corrected. "Because we're trying to change things." "Exactly." He pulled out his phone, showing her a series of emails. "While the press has been focused on criticizing you, something interesting has been happening. Applications for our education programs have tripled. Most of them reference your story as their inspiration. Sarah took the phone, scrolling through messages from parents, students, community leaders, all seeing possibility where there had been only closed doors before. The board can question my judgment all they want, Marcus continued. But they can't argue with impact, and you, Sarah Martinez, are already making an impact. Mike appeared with their usual coffee orders, plus a piece of paper Sarah recognized, the original application she'd filled out for her waitressing job, kept in the diner's files for over 20 years. Found this while cleaning out the old. A filing cabinet, Mike said, handing it to her. Thought you might want it. Shows where you started, how far you've come. Sarah looked at her younger self's handwriting, at the hopes and dreams crammed into the small spaces between questions about experience and availability. She'd been terrified then too, starting over as a single mom with nothing but determination. You know what? She said, standing suddenly. Let's go back to that board meeting. I have something to say to them. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You sure? Yes. She carefully folded her old application and placed it in her blazer pocket, right next to her old name tag from the diner. It's time to remind everyone that qualifications come in many forms, and the view from the bottom teaches you things you can't learn at the top. As they left the diner, Sarah caught her reflection in the window. Not quite the waitress she'd been, not exactly the executive others expected her to be, but something new, a bridge between worlds that had been separate for too long. The boardroom fell silent as Sarah finished speaking. She remained standing, her old diner name tag gleaming under the corporate lighting, her application from Joe's spread out on the polished table before her. For the past hour, she'd laid out her vision for the community centers, drawing on 2 decades of experience in understanding what people really needed. So yes, she concluded, meeting each board member's gaze in turn, I may not have an MBA, but I have a PhD in human experience, earned 1 coffee cup, 1 conversation, 1 connection at a time. That's what these centers need. That's what your investment will build. Marcus sat at the far end of the table, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes bright with pride. He'd remained silent throughout her presentation, letting her own voice carry the weight of their shared vision. Thompson, the board member who'd been most vocal about his concerns, cleared his throat. Ms. Martinez, your passion is admirable, but passion doesn't guarantee success. Mr. Chen's temporary lapse in judgment aside, temporary. Marcus interrupted, standing. No, Richard, this is the clearest my judgment has ever been. He walked to the front of the room, taking his place beside Sarah. When I spent that year living as Mark Chang, I learned something crucial. Success isn't just about profits. It's about impact. Sarah understands that in a way none of us here do. Thompson gestured to the financial projections displayed on the screen. The shareholders will benefit, Sarah cut in, surprising herself with her confidence, because what we're building isn't just another corporate initiative, it's a bridge between worlds. Every person who walks into these centers is a potential customer, employee, innovator. We're not just doing good, we're expanding our horizons. She pulled out the keys to the first center. Marcus had given them to her that morning. The pilot location opens in 2 weeks. Come see for yourself. Watch what happens when you give people not just resources, but respect. When you create spaces where dreams don't have to apologize for existing. The room was quiet for a moment before Jessica spoke up from her corner. I've reviewed the community response data. Applications for our educational programs have quadrupled. Local businesses are requesting partnerships. 3 other cities have reached out about replicating the model. One by one, the board members began nodding. Even Thompson's expression softened slightly. 2 weeks, he said. We'll reserve judgment until then. After the meeting, Sarah and Marcus stood in front of the construction site. The center's facade was nearly complete, its large windows reflecting the late afternoon sun. The sign would go up tomorrow, the Chen Martinez Community Innovation Center. Chen Martinez, Sarah asked, raising an eyebrow. Your name belongs up there, Marcus said simply. Equal partners, remember? Sarah touched the keys in her pocket, thinking about all the doors that had been closed to her over the years. You know, when you first suggested I run this project, I thought it was crazy. Now, she gazed at the building, seeing not just glass and steel, but possibility made concrete. Now I wonder if this is what I've been preparing for all along. Every difficult customer, every late-night shift, every time I had to figure out how to make something from nothing. It was all teaching me what people need, what communities need. Marcus smiled, that real smile she'd first seen in the rain. That's exactly why it had to be you. You understand both sides of the window, looking in and looking out. A group of teenagers walked past, pointing at the building with curious expressions. Sarah could almost see herself at their age, dreaming bigger than her circumstances allowed. Now she was building a place where such dreams could take root and grow. Ready for this? Marcus asked quietly. Sarah gripped the keys, feeling their weight. Not just metal, but responsibility, opportunity, change. Ready. Opening day arrived. With a line of people stretching around the block, Sarah stood in the center's entrance, taking in the space that had transformed from sketch to reality. The cafe area gleamed with warm woods and comfortable seating, while the learning spaces were equipped with the latest technology. Photos lined the walls, not of corporate achievements, but of community moments. Sarah's old picture from Joe's Diner, Marcus's convenience store childhood, and dozens of others contributed by local residents. "Mom!" Amy called, hurrying over, in her Chen Technologies intern badge. The environmental science lab is packed. Kids are actually fighting over who gets to use the simulation stations first. Sarah smiled, watching her daughter practically bounce with excitement. Amy had helped design some of the educational programs, bringing her university experience and passion for environmental science to the project. Your mother built this, Marcus said, appearing beside them. All of it started with her understanding of what a community needs. The first dollar earned at the cafe had been framed, not Marcus's idea, but Sarah's. She'd insisted on keeping the prices accessible, with a pay-what-you-can option for the educational programs. Sometimes people just need a chance, she'd argued, and Marcus had agreed without hesitation. Mike from Joe's Diner had come to help train the cafe staff, bringing his decades of experience in creating a welcoming atmosphere. It's like the diner, he'd said, but with dreams built right into the foundation. A young girl approached Sarah, clutching a science workbook. Ms. Martinez, they said you could help me with my project. It's about water conservation, but pull up a chair, Sarah said warmly, gesturing to a nearby table. That's exactly what we're here for. Throughout the day, Sarah moved through the spaces she'd helped create. In one corner, a former Joe's Diner regular was teaching basic computer skills to a group of elderly residents. In another, a teenage boy who'd once been homeless, the one whose brother had posted about Sarah's kindness, was leading a peer study group. Thompson and other board members toured the facility, their initial skepticism fading as they watched. The center in action. The local news had sent reporters too, but this time they were covering the story Sarah and Marcus had wanted to tell all along, one of community, opportunity, and bridges being built. "Sarah," Marcus called softly, drawing her attention to the entrance. A woman in a housekeeping uniform stood there, hesitant to enter. Sarah recognized that hesitation. She'd seen it in the mirror years ago. "Welcome," she said, approaching. The woman, "Can I show you around? Maybe start with some coffee?" As she led the woman through the center, explaining the programs and possibilities available, Sarah caught Marcus watching her. He was dressed simply today, more Mark than Marcus, understanding that this space needed to feel accessible to everyone. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the center's mission statement, written in both Sarah and Marcus's handwriting. Everyone's dreams deserve room to grow. A small commotion arose from the environmental lab, Amy's voice rising in excitement as she explained something to a group of enthralled students. Sarah watched her daughter in her element, teaching others with the same passion that had once driven her to research oil spills at her kitchen table. "We did it," Marcus said quietly, joining her. "You did it." Sarah touched the name tag she still kept in her pocket, not as a reminder of where she'd been, but as proof that every experience had led her here. "We all did it. Every person who ever sat at my counter, every dream shared over coffee, every moment of connection, it all built this." The day continued, full of small triumphs and quiet victories. Each person who walked through the doors found something they needed, whether it was knowledge, opportunity, or simply a space to belong. Sarah moved through it all, no longer the waitress or the controversial executive, but exactly who she'd always been, someone who understood that everyone's story deserved a chance to be heard. 1 year later, Sarah stood at the same intersection where she'd first spotted Marcus in the rain. The Chen Martinez Community Innovation Center had become a fixture in the neighborhood, spawning 5 more locations across Seattle. Each center had its own character, but all shared the same foundation: genuine connection, accessible opportunity, and dreams given room to grow. The rain fell softly, a gentle Seattle mist rather than the downpour of that fateful night. Sarah held an umbrella this time, a proper one, though she smiled, remembering Marcus's $5 disaster. She was waiting for him now, their weekly tradition of visiting each center together about to begin. "Still can't believe you're making a billionaire take public transport," Amy teased over the phone. She was calling from her new apartment near the university, where she'd just started her graduate studies in environmental engineering. Her Chen Technologies internship had turned into a part-time research position, allowing her to pursue advanced studies while helping develop educational programs for the centers. "He's the one who insists," Sarah replied. "Says it keeps us connected to the community we serve." A bus pulled up, and Marcus stepped off, wearing one of his Mark Chang ties with a beautifully tailored suit, the perfect blend of his 2 worlds. "Ready for our rounds?" he asked, joining her under the umbrella. They walked together toward the first center, passing Joe's Diner along the way. Mike waved from inside, where he now split his time between managing the diner and training staff for the center's cafes. The diner had become something of a landmark, with visitors often requesting the booth where it all started. "Thompson called this morning," Marcus said as they walked. "The board's approved expansion to 3 more cities. They're finally seeing what we saw, that community investment yields returns you can't always measure in dollars." Sarah nodded, thinking of all the stories they'd collected over the past year. The single mother who'd learned coding while her kids did homework in the study area. The retired teacher who'd found a new purpose leading senior education programs. The teenager who'd discovered environmental science and was now following Amy's path at the university. They reached the center just as a group of students was leaving, animated discussions about their projects spilling into the street. Inside, the space hummed with activity. The cafe served both coffee and possibilities. The learning areas buzzed with collaboration, and the community board overflowed with success stories. "Oh, good, you're both here," Jessica called, approaching with a tablet. "The wedding planner needs final approval on these details." Sarah and Marcus exchanged a look. Their relationship had evolved naturally, their shared vision of changing lives growing into something deeper. The upcoming wedding would be small, held in the original center after hours, with Mike catering and Amy as the maid of honor. "Keep it simple," they said in unison, making Jessica roll her eyes fondly. Later, after their rounds, they found themselves back at Mel's Diner. Their booth was empty, as it always seemed to be when they needed it. The same waitress who'd served them that first night brought their coffee with a knowing smile. "Did you ever imagine this?" Sarah asked, watching Marcus absently sketch on a napkin, a habit he'd never lost. That night in the rain, did you think one act of kindness would lead to all this? Marcus looked up from his drawing. Another idea for expanding their programs. I was looking for something real, he said. Found something better. Found a partner who could see both the dream and the way to make it work. Sarah touched her old name tag, now framed alongside Marcus's fake ID in their office. We should add rain to the wedding decor, she mused, since it played such a key role in our story. Already suggested it to the planner. Marcus grinned. She thinks we're crazy. Maybe we are, Sarah agreed. The waitress and the billionaire, building bridges between worlds. No, Marcus said softly, reaching for her hand. Just two people who learned that the best dreams are the ones you share. Outside, the rain continued its gentle pattern. No longer a barrier, but a reminder of how the simplest moments could change everything. Through the diner's window, they could see their center's lights glowing warmly in the evening sky, a beacon for others seeking their own paths to possibility.